I like it. I like it.
Hello and welcome to another NihongoGamer video. As you can see here, I've got a video up for the CrossUp controller. It's a new controller which is not quite out yet, but it's coming out quite soon. It's by the same company as Hitbox, which is the red and white controller up here in the video. Now, much like how that red and white controller back there has been controversial over the years, this new controller here in the foreground, the CrossUp, is also at the center of some big controversy, especially when it comes to fighting games. For a quick primer, the fighting game started on controllers like this, in the arcades, you know? You had a stick, it goes in 8 different directions, and it has neutral in the middle, and you have a bunch of buttons here on the side. But as fighting games started coming to home consoles, we started playing them on controllers like this. This is just a standard DualShock 4 controller for the PlayStation 4. But in addition to the fact that unlike an arcade stick using your whole hand to wiggle this lever, you actually use your thumb for this D-pad, there's one also major crucial difference, and it's the fact that it's got this analog stick. And I think it's fair to say that this controller here, the new CrossUp, which is coming out soon, is basically based on the fact that controllers like this are allowed to have a D-pad and an analog stick. Now, I think you're probably quite familiar with the game that we've got up here. It's Street Fighter, and I'm playing a character called Guile. And originally, when you played it on an arcade stick, you only had one of these controllers, not the D-pad and the analog stick, but you had basically a stick only. And the way that Guile works is that you hold down one direction, and then you change direction, and you press a button to send out a projectile. His other move that does this is you hold down for a couple seconds, and then you press up and kick, and then you get a flash kick move. So if someone's jumping towards you, you might want to throw out one of these as quickly as you can, right? Well, for whatever reason, with Street Fighter V, and I have no idea why, you can actually use both of these input methods at the same time. So if I want to use the D-pad here on the side, I can press left and right with this controller, and at the same time, I can also use the analog stick. Well, moving from all the way down here to up here takes a little bit of time, and you could potentially miss. You could move to the wrong direction, press the wrong button or something. There's a much larger margin for error there. But since this controller, the DualShock 4, is the official controller for the PlayStation 4, you can't really go and ban this controller. So people have discovered that just using this main controller, which is tournament legal, you can hold down on one set of directions and you can press up on a different set of directions. Which means that now if I want to throw out a flash kick as quickly as possible, I can hold down with one set of controllers, and I can press up with a different set of controls. And as a result of using a separate set of directions, instead of going up and then having to return my thumb back to the down position to charge for the next flash kick, because I want to be as ready as possible for the next time I need a move like that, by using a separate set of directions, I just leave my thumb there and it's already charging as quickly as physically possible for the next flash kick that I want to send out. And just so you can see, it also works for sonic booms. I hold backwards to charge and then forward and the sonic boom, and then I'm immediately back to charging as quickly as physically possible. So wouldn't it be nice if we could do the same things on our arcade sticks? We could be charging one way with our left hand, and we could use an analog stick. We could maybe place it here or something, and just like that, send off fireballs, sonic booms, flash kicks, and then always be ready to charge as quickly as possible because we're still charging with our left hand. Well, imagine that. Apparently the Hitbox company has decided to make just that. Now, since you're pressing buttons with your right hand like this, it would be very difficult to manipulate a little analog thumbstick if it was like sitting right here. So instead, this company Hitbox has done it backwards. They put a little analog stick here on the left, and they've put little buttons left, down, right, up here on the right side of the controller. So it's easier to press, just like the buttons you normally press here on the right side. It's the same motion. So even though you can't see it, that lever portion of this arcade stick is actually an analog stick. And as far as I'm aware, that's the only reason that this controller can be deemed tournament legal, because you've got direction buttons on the left and the right, but one of them's analog stick. And basically, somebody already made this controller tournament legal, so this one is too. But even though it has this weird little benefit, it is still kind of awkward because unless you set up your shortcut buttons correctly, you still kind of have to reach over with your right thumb to press this analog stick. So let's say I'm moving around and then I decide that I want to throw a sonic boom, and then like that. Gotta reach over with my right thumb to the left analog stick. So it was really important to me that since Hitbox was coming to EVO Japan to show off this controller, I really wanted to see for myself just how crazy is this controller, and can it do stuff that is actually unfair or not? It's time to figure out once and for all. So after checking out the Hitbox controller, I got this little rundown of the CrossUp, so let's have a listen to it together.
Now, the entire thesis statement of this is you're a stick player.
I'm a stick player, yeah.
You will never, ever, ever, ever convert to Hitbox.
Alright, so the idea of this stick is that you're not going to play on Hitbox because you like wangling your left arm like this on a stick. Like this. It just feels fun.
But yeah, again, there's certain pieces of tech that are available to Hitbox players only.
So we went through this in the Hitbox controller video recently, and he was showing us special little tricks, and there's a whole video about it, so do check out the link below if you're interested. But there are a number of tricks that you can only really do when you've got a button-based controller.
If I really wanted God's flash kick, I could be holding down, and then just for flash kick, I press this.
I need to try that now.
So that's basically the same thing that we just saw with this controller here. You'd be holding down back on one set of controls and then press up and kick on a separate set of controls.
So the PlayStation is still seeing analog inputs from this?
Yes.
Okay. So if you push slowly on it, can you play analog games? You can play racing games on it?
Yeah, if you really wanted to.
So there you go. Confirmation that this is in fact not a digital stick on the CrossUp. That is instead an analog stick. And if you took the clicky portions out, the switches that make it feel like it's clicky, then it would just feel like a smoothly moving, rotating analog controller. That said, I think it would be really weird because using your whole arm, you don't have quite the same precision that your thumb does on an analog stick. But who knows, we could get used to it.
What are you trying to do, flash kick or boom?
Sorry, I'm trying to do booms.
You cannot press forward. Yeah, you cannot.
You've told it not to, but technically it could.
Yes.
Physically speaking.
The software inside the CrossUp is following the same software as this.
Okay, but on DualShock 4, technically, if you press forward on this, and then it would come out.
So this is a really important distinction that I wanted to check when I was talking to the Hitbox company about this. But on the DualShock 4, I can be pressing back like this, and then I can just throw out a boom by pressing the other controller like this. So if that exact same functionality came to the stick version, then we could be holding back like this. And while holding back, we could just press two buttons, which is one of them is forward and the other one is punch. I could just do this while holding back on the stick. However, it seems that is not the case with this controller that they're building. You can hold down and then press up on a separate controller, but you cannot hold left and then press right on a separate controller, which is actually different to how this works. I can be holding left with my D-pad and I can press right as much as I want on the analog stick, and it will always just take over and just go straight back to left after I let go of right. So a controller like DualShock 4 will give priority to whichever direction comes in most recently. Not the case with the CrossUp, which is what he was saying about simultaneous opposing cardinal directions rule set, which was built for the red and white controller there in the back, the Hitbox.
So this will work with jump though, because jump has priority, right? Yes. Wait.
So you can see there, just by holding down back, you can actually just do one single motion and get the flash kick out as quickly as possible, and then you're going straight back to charging with, I guess, zero delay.
And if I try the super, I have to press forward with the super, right?
Yes. Same as you would with the
Okay, so that doesn't change. Except for, I don't have to press up now.
Yeah, because you already pressed the flash kick.
I see.
You just do the super.
So this segment kind of clarifies a couple things to us. The CrossUp controller cannot do everything that a DualShock 4 can. While on a DualShock 4 you could be charging backwards and then press forwards and punch anytime you like to throw out a boom as quickly as possible and then go back to charging the next boom as quickly as possible. You can't do that on the CrossUp controller. But you do get that benefit of being able to charge down like this and then press up and kick to let out flash kicks as quickly as possible and then go back to charging as quickly as possible. And again, this is not because it's physically impossible, but because it uses the same rules as their other controller, the Hitbox, which has something called an SOCD cleaner, which means that if I'm holding down left, then when I press right, instead of getting right, I'll get neutral. So it doesn't matter which direction came in most recently, just if both are being pressed, nothing gets pressed.
You just do the super, except this. We've interviewed several top players for this. What appeals to them a lot for Street Fighter is you get the same SOCD dashes if you really wanted to.
Yeah, because I'm more used to double tapping with my right hand anyway. That's nuts. And also, especially on the stick, a lot of people, depending on their grip, it's harder to like dash left.
So this is something I really was glad that I asked about. So as I understand it, as it was explained to me, instead of double tapping a direction to dash, which is what I thought would happen, because of these SOCD rules, because you're holding forward like this, when you press the opposite direction, like that, it flicks momentarily to neutral, and then when you let go, it flicks back to forward, and then the game sees forward, as quick as physically possible. So that's the tech that they call the SOCD dash. Again, if I've got that wrong and you're a Hitbox player, do let me know. So the general gist I'm getting from this presentation is that this new controller that's going to come out, the Hitbox CrossUp, is not actually better or more advantageous really compared to any of the controllers that we've already had up until this point. And it's like he said at the beginning of the presentation, it gives you hitbox techniques, but you continue to play on stick with your whole arm like this. And in fact, compared to this DualShock 4 controller, it doesn't have as many features because the DualShock 4 controller allows you to charge backwards and then press forwards with the analog stick to get a boom out as quickly as possible. You actually can't do that on the CrossUp, but you do get one of the benefits of the DualShock controller, which is holding down and then using a separate button to press up for a flash kick. So the flash kick comes out really quickly, and then you go back to charging really, really quickly.
This is absolutely bonkers. So how much is this one?
No price setting as of launching. We kickstarted it. The effective price point was about $200 based on the Kickstarter. When it comes out, it's probably going to be around that price because it might go up and down.
Yeah.
So don't actually know when it's going to be released. I think it's sometime around now, and it's going to be something like $200, or maybe that's the price that they put on the Kickstarter. Who knows? When they actually go into production, depending on supply and demand, maybe the price will go up, maybe the price will go down.
Okay. That flash kick does need an up input, doesn't it?
The flash kick doesn't need up input.
You can't just go like... So now I don't even need to go to normal forward, I can just go to down forward.
Oh, for the Sonic Boom, yes.
Yeah. I like it. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Oh man.
Okay, that kind of surprised me at the end. I wasn't really expecting that. Usually for this move to come out with Guile, you have to press down back, and then up forward, and then back, and then forward. And when you're a beginner, this can potentially be a little bit confusing because you're like going from a corner to a different corner to another corner, or potentially not a corner, and then another direction, which is potentially not a corner. So there's like that wiggle room there between up, down, and forward. But as you saw in the demonstration just there, I was able to go down back, and then for the flash kick, instead of going to up forward, I was able to stay in down forward. So down back, down forward, down back, forward. And the reason it works is because even though I'm holding down forward, because I press a button, which essentially inputs jump, it means I'm pressing down forward on one stick and I'm pressing up on another controller. So my down forward, it looks like down forward, but it's actually being read as up forward by the game. Now, this isn't really the place to open up the moral debate as to whether this controller is fair or unfair, or maybe even the original Hitbox, is that fair or unfair? This isn't really the place to discuss that now, because that can be a completely separate video, and we have in fact talked about it in previous videos before. My general takeaway is that I thought that it was going to be a lot like the features of this, but on a layout like this, which makes it so much easier to do. However, as it turns out, it's actually got some of the features of this on a layout like this, which is easier for me to use, but minus the ability to hold down left or right and then press right whenever I want it, and for it to just come out immediately. Anyway, this controller hasn't even released yet, so I'm well up for talking about this again in the future, and if there's anything that I've got wrong, please do leave a comment below. I will try to pin it or update an edited post at the top of the comments to make sure that everyone's got as accurate information as possible. I think if I have any closing remarks on this, it's that innovation in controllers is great, and I would love to see this controller succeed, and I would love to see more controllers continue to innovate what we can do with the way that we interface with our games. But I think it is also fair to say that this is not how the game was intended to run when they first invented this character. Because when most of these games were designed, they didn't know that a controller like this was going to come out. So the design of Guile is that you hold down one direction, and then when you want a fireball to come out, you've got to go to the other direction, and it takes time. But just because a game was designed like that in the past shouldn't affect what we do in the future. But maybe you feel differently. Let me know in the comments below what you think of this controller, the Hitbox CrossUp, which is not quite out yet, but I believe it's coming out very soon. We also have a room on Discord if you want to talk about gear. We have a room called Gear Chat where you can come and chat about all sorts of stuff like controllers. We're basically in there like 24/7 just talking about controllers. That's all for now. Don't forget to comment, subscribe, share the links and all that great stuff, and I'll see you in the next NihongoGamer video.